Dr. Craig Chepke is the Medical Director of Excel Psychiatric Associates in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Adjunct Associate Professor of Psychiatry at Atrium Health, and the Adjunct Assistant Professor of Psychiatry at the UNC School of Medicine. He is also a member of the HD Reach Board of Directors, and we are so glad that you are here with us today. Thank you.
Well, I'm extremely excited to be here. Thanks to everybody who logged in today. This is just a wonderful opportunity for the HD community to get together because, as you know, there's not enough of these type of opportunities. And if you've taken a look at the title of my presentation, the subtitle there, Staying Resilient Through Trauma, Grief, and Isolation. Isolation is something that, as a psychiatrist, I do work with many people who do have HD and their families, and they often tell me that they feel very isolated and they don't have a sense of community, as opposed to my patients with Parkinson's disease, who generally have wonderful communities. There's tremendous amounts of different support groups that meet constantly. Just in Charlotte, there's gosh, I can't even tell you how many Parkinson's support groups I've spoken at. But other than HD Reach, not a whole lot of support for HD, people with HD in their families. So I'm excited that everyone showed up here today. Anyway, so I made this presentation deliberately as short as humanly possible because, as my wife likes to say, no matter how short you make it, you're going to go over time anyway. So just put your name and a title up and don't even do anything after that. I did a little more than that, but actually not a lot. So the title of the presentation, Fall 7 Times, Get Up 8. If you see the Japanese characters to the right of the slide, that's that is one of the transliterations of the English. There is the transliteration of that Japanese saying. And what it means is that you have to get up the first time, and then even if you fall 7 times, you get up 8 times. Every time that something bad happens to you, we might say it in Western culture, get back on the horse. I just think it's a really beautiful way to describe it. And from the time that I heard it, I was really taken with that particular phrasing of it, that no matter how many times we fall, we have to get back up. So there's a lot of things that are going on in the world, obviously, that can be traumatic. Trauma doesn't have to be a war injury or a car crash. I would say there was quite a bit of trauma in the community after what Dr. Sung was talking about, the results of those 2 clinical trials. At some degree, I felt that myself. I was devastated. What a great hope. And then they seemingly were snatched away from us. But as Dr. Sung said, that's not the end of the story. All science gives us a learning point from which we can get better. So the companies making the ASOs, they fell, but they will get up again. And if they have to fall, hopefully they will rise. If they have to fall 7 times, hopefully they will rise 8 for the HD community. Even getting the diagnosis of HD, that could be trauma. Grief, the grief that we've felt with COVID, what we've lost over the past year. I made this really a broad, kind of vague type of presentation because everyone goes through different things, and I wanted to give some broad, general kind of coping techniques. So I'll go on to the next slide. And what my goal is just to give you 8 skills to get back up when you fall. And whatever you fall from, these are kind of general things that if you can put into place, I think will help you to get back up. And please do, everybody, put questions into the question box. Q&A is my favorite part of any presentation, especially when doing these types of presentations with patients and families. So don't hesitate to put some questions in. When I made the slide deck, I made it as a build slide, so you'd only see one at a time, but I had to upload it as a PDF. So try to just look at the one at a time. The most important thing you could probably do to get started if you're struggling with trauma, with grief, with isolation, anything, would be to get better sleep. In my clinical practice, saying that I say 10 times a day probably is, sleep is the foundation of mental health. And without a good foundation, your whole house is going to crumble. And that's true whether it's depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, HD, anything, impulsivity, just you name it, and poor sleep is going to worsen it. So that's something that I recommend to everybody because most people don't have very great sleep habits. And then with COVID, that went through the roof. The amount of insomnia that I saw in my practice just some days pushed 100%. So doing things like putting down the phone, that's one of the biggest problems that I see people have is that they'll have their cell phone or a tablet or something right in front of their eyes right before they go to sleep. And that's it goes against one of the principles of what we call sleep hygiene. And sleep hygiene is a set of principles that will help you to get better sleep. You don't want a lot of light. When the light hits the back of our eyes, it inhibits melatonin release. Before we had, before Thomas Edison came along and invented artificial light, humans didn't have as much problem sleeping because when the sun went down, and you wanted to conserve the fire, and you would just the light would go down naturally. They didn't have a lot of bright lights like we do now. Certainly not inches from their face. So when the light goes down, when the sun goes down, try to start winding down the artificial light too before going to sleep. I'm not going to go into every sleep hygiene type of thought today because that would be take up more than a 20-minute talk. But that's one of the most egregious things that I see in patients currently. The other one I'll throw in real quick, especially in this past turbulent year and a half or so with social unrest, political arguments, is what's called doom scrolling. People that will just scroll through their Facebook feeds and read all the bad news in the world, or it could be a news site. Anything that they just can't get enough, it seems like. And so I've started asking that of everyone as well, is that how much news and social media are you taking in on a daily basis? The answer is always probably too much. And that specifically ties into sleep, which is why I mentioned here, because people often are doing that right before they go to bed, which is a terrible idea, because unless you're reading some good news, which is hard to find, find that many times, that's going to be make it a little bit harder for you. Anyway, moving along, if finding a purpose is very important, and this is again, these are general principles for everybody, but we need to have some sort of purpose as humans. I believe that if when we feel lost and we don't know what to do, we lose our sense of purpose. And figuring out what that is, depending on where you are with the illness, if that's your journey, then you might feel like you don't have any purpose anymore. Maybe you might your career might have been taken away from you potentially, as commonly happens with all neurodegenerative diseases at some point, or anything else. Or maybe because of COVID, you lost your job. Who knows? But find that purpose. Sometimes we can get into autopilot in life that we just keep going through the motions and we lose sight of why we're doing the things that we do. And if you find that purpose, whatever it is, that makes a tremendous difference in the ability to get back up. Because if you don't feel like you're going anywhere and you fall, why get back up? You weren't going anywhere anyway. So find that purpose and remember it. And then the next I have here is develop a structure and routine in your life. Again, in the past year and a half with COVID, that's been tremendously difficult for a lot of people. People who were in the workforce and went to working at home, they lost the structure of they would get up, take a shower, have their commute in. They had a routine that they went through over rituals. And or even if pardon me, if you were someone who was a stay-at-home parent, well, very often now the children are at home and you're having to manage them. Your routine is off, the structure is gone. This ties into sleep as well. When you don't have to be up at specific times anymore, your sleep circadian rhythms get thrown off as well. So make an effort to put a structure and a routine in your life. As my little icon there suggests, maybe making a to-do list is one way to do it. At the end of each day, make a to-do list of what you want to get done the next day. You could also do it in terms of scheduling. Get out a calendar for the week and just schedule everything, including things like free time. A lot of times it's very hard for people to get started because they feel overwhelmed with the sheer number of things that they have to do. And they can procrastinate and then not enough gets done. And so if you schedule the amount of free time or social media time, things like that, it makes it easier to not let that bleed over into your entire day. So whatever it takes for you as an individual to get motivated and get that structure and routine, do that because it's tremendously important in maintaining your mental health. The next one, last one on this slide, there's four more on the next slide, is don't wait to reach out for help or support. I see so many people who they they really should have come into my office for treatment months prior, years prior, more often actually, or they should have reached out to family or friends so much sooner than they did. And oftentimes it's because they're embarrassed. They feel like, oh, everyone else is able to do this. I should be able to as well. I don't want people to think I'm weak or that I can't do it. And they hold off and they hold off, and that's almost always just a tremendous mistake. Uh, your support networks, they want you to reach out. Clinicians in the HD community, we want you to reach out for help. And the longer you let it wait, the more difficult often it is to solve some of these problems. So be proactive. And again, as a psychiatrist, let me tell you, it's happened so many times in my career that someone will say, "Oh, so and so is just they seem to do it so easily." And because of confidentiality, I can't tell them, but I actually see that other person, and they are struggling mightily. And but the person in my office at the time, they think that their life is so easy. Especially when I worked in a little bit of a smaller town over in Kannapolis, that happened more often. Uh, so be proactive and get the help when you need it. Don't wait. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So the next four here. So the first one here is I like to think of anxiety and fear. Fear to me is just a type of anxiety like a bully. The more that you back down from a bully, the more it's going to come. That bully is going to come after you to get your lunch money. If you were back in elementary, middle school days, right? Anxiety and fear to me are the same way. The more we back down from our anxiety and our fear, the stronger it gets. It gets built up so much that it gets harder and harder and harder to overcome it when we do try and make that effort. So when the bully finally backs down, to use my middle school analogy, it's when you stand up and you know that you have a chance of getting punched right in the mouth, but you're not going to be walked all over one more time by this guy. That's what you got to do to the fear or the anxiety, is not back down. It could be very unpleasant. It probably will be unpleasant, but that's okay because you got to be able to move forward. The next one is to be able to accept what you can't change. I'm sure everyone hopefully is familiar with the Serenity Prayer, to be able to change the things we can, to accept the things we cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. We kind of butchered it, but you get the picture. But there are certain things in life that we can't change. Uh, a diagnosis of HD is one of those. There are many things. A common example I give is that, well, what if you planned a beautiful romantic picnic with your partner? You put in a lot of effort, and it was supposed to be a lovely day, and as soon as you go to walk out the door, tremendous rain clouds come. It's a thunderstorm. It's going to last all day. You, I guess you could shake your fist at the sky and scream at the clouds and be angry and have it ruin the rest of your day, but that's not going to change what the weather is doing, is it? Best thing to do is just accept it and move on and find another way to be happy. So that's the key there, is that recognizing there are some things that we just can't change and being able to move on once we accept that. The next one is the power of positive thinking. And I've seen this in my career so often that I truly believe it. Everybody, when they come in to see a psychiatrist, they're never doing well, right? They're often at the bottom of the barrel and they want to get better. But it's never a straight line. People will have improvement and then they'll take a little bit of a dip and then they'll improve again and take a dip and then they'll improve. Well, when people get to that point where they have that little downturn after they've made some progress, the people who panic and say things either internally or verbally, such as, "Oh, I guess it's back to square one. All hope is lost. I shouldn't have even bothered. Why'd I even try? I knew it wasn't going to last." Those negative self-talk cognitions. Those people, just anecdotally, they tend to be more likely to continue that downward slide. Whereas the people who reach that point where they've dipped a little bit, the ones who say, well, I'm going to get through this. This too shall pass. This isn't the end for me. Those positive thinking, those positive thoughts, those people, and I don't have a clinical trial for this, but those people do seem to pull out of it at a much greater frequency. So even if you don't believe those thoughts at first, make yourself think them. Put those positive thoughts into your head. Another saying we use in mental health a lot is fake it until you make it. Even if you don't believe something, if you do things that are in the line in the path of where you would like to be, then you're more likely to be able to get there. Dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Yet another analogy. And overall, as long as that, even though it's not a straight line to improvement, as long as the overall course is upwards, that's the important thing for what I look for as a psychiatrist. So that's what I really want to stress is just not to give up. And then the last one is kind of related is having a growth mindset. So when you have that setback, when you maybe fail at something, whether it's a test or a job or whatever, think of it as an opportunity to learn and get better. And that is I mean, that's something I try and teach my kids. That's a principle I try to live by. It's just a principle for, I think, good mental health is that if you can learn from your mistakes and get better, that's a great way of framing the setback, the traumatic event, the grief that you're suffering is that, well, this is going to help me to the next stage, that there's maybe it relates to your higher power if you have one, that this is all part of a greater plan. So these are running out of time, and I think I'm doing pretty well. I don't see any questions in the question box, but these are 8 general principles that I think will help most people with most types of trauma, grief, isolation that you might be going through. You may use one, you may use more than one, but take what kind of works for you. Of these 8, hopefully at least 1 or 2 or 3 of them might have really resonated for you as areas of potential growth opportunities that you can incorporate into your life, no matter what that struggle might be. So, and let's see, did a question come in? So it was in the chat, not the questions, but that this advice can be difficult to apply in age-generative illness, but can be modified. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was saying in terms of you can take some of these and not the others, but you can also modify it. Some of these are going to be potentially a little bit over-optimistic, some might think, for neurodegenerative illness, but uh, I think the overall summary, which I put in my last slide here, probably too small of print, is keep fighting. That's something that I've really tried to live by. I had a patient who was a young man a few years ago now who eventually died by suicide, and his younger brother actually liked to do woodworking, and he did woodworking for me of a sign about the size of a sheet of paper that he carved himself that said "Keep fighting." And he wanted to give that to me. And he intended it as an inspiration to my patients that they needed to keep fighting. I put it above the door in my office that every time I walk into my office, that I see the sign too, as a reminder that I need to keep fighting for my patients as well. Because if I stop fighting, how can I expect my patients to stop fighting? But no matter what you're facing, never give up and always keep fighting.
Thank you, Dr. Chepke. I love that message, and I think it resonates with all of us because I know we're all just going to keep fighting together to, defeat these challenges and make sure that we can live well.